nuclear threat and blackmail of the U.S., allies and enemies of the North. They all joined forces Friday in opposition to the North's determination to be recognized as a nuclear weapon state. And another first for SpaceX at Cape Canaveral today. It launched a recycled rocket with a recycled capsule. The unmanned capsule being sent into space on what's being called a grocery run. Supplies are being sent to the International Space Station. The SpaceX craft should reach there by Sunday. I'm Trace Gallagher. If news breaks out, we'll break in. Now back to the story.
10 days till Christmas, and there is this ominous warning from ISIS tonight. Soon on your holidays. Soon. Very soon. The terror group's supporters promising attacks on churches over the course of the Christmas season, and it comes just days after the failed suicide bombing in New York City in the subway system. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harris joins us now with the latest on the credibility of these threats. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Martha. An Islamic State supporter posted this graphic showing an ISIS fighter looking at Washington's National Cathedral, which is in flames. Like previous propaganda, includes a cryptic message suggesting even threatening an attack time for the holidays. For some context, this was not published by the ISIS news agency, but rather one of its followers. Analysts also tell Fox News there has been a subtle shift. A recent edition of the ISIS online magazine laid out the steps to execute these vehicle attacks like the one we saw in October in New York City, where 8 were killed and several others were injured. ISIS is now encouraging followers to flee the scene and survive. With the loss of the so-called caliphate in Iraq and Syria, one analyst suggests the group is facing a shortage of recruits who are willing to die for the cause. Also, a counterterrorism contact who does work for the U.S. government tells Fox he believes ISIS has not been more aggressive, taking responsibility for the 27-year-old suspect in Monday's New York City subway attack because the terror group is scattered, having lost its base in Iraq and Syria, and key decision makers who ran their external operations and propaganda are dead. Analysts are also telling us to watch Hamza bin Laden. This is the son of al-Qaeda's Osama bin Laden. He's believed to be in his late 20s. A senior analyst says Hamza may be able to bring together al-Qaeda and the remnants of ISIS because he is young, doesn't have the baggage of the current al-Qaeda leadership, and Hamza bin Laden, for obvious reasons, has the name recognition, Martha.
It certainly does. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Joining me once again, Karl Rove, Chris Stirewalt, and Molly Hemingway. It is chilling to look at all of those images, and also the picture of Hamza bin Laden, because one thing that we have learned over the years about al-Qaeda and about ISIS is that they're patient. They create goals, scenarios that they want to carry out, and if it takes months or years, that's what they do. But it is, I guess, in some ways heartening to hear in Catherine's report that at this moment they are somewhat scattered, and it is of interest that they did not choose to claim these 2 New York attackers as their own, although they were ISIS-inspired. So how prepared politically, in terms of the Trump administration and what's being done, Molly, are we? How strong is our posture right now on this front?
Right. Well, one thing to remember is that ISIS tends not to take credit for people who commit terror attacks unless they are killed in the terror attack. And both of those New York attackers are still alive. And that might be part of why ISIS isn't taking credit. I mean, sometimes people are flying ISIS flags, they have the notes, they claim inspiration, and ISIS still doesn't take credit. But that's why, again, I'm really interested in this national security strategy document that's coming out on Monday. H.R. McMaster gave a bit of a preview to it. During the Obama administration, it was focused a lot on cybersecurity and climate change. And this document, I believe, is going to be focused more like a laser on North Korea, jihadist terrorism, things that actually are security threats that the national security apparatus should be engaged in. And you're already seeing that the Trump administration has focused on ISIS and had some pretty strong success with that. But of course, Islamist terrorism is something that will be ongoing. There is no way to utterly defeat it. It's a religiously motivated ideology, which is why they are thinking about focusing on Christians. And Christians should be prepared for that. That's just part of the story.
I mean, we've certainly seen what they've done in the Middle East, Chris, and churches are one of their favorite targets. And as Molly rightly points out, it is a religious-based extremism that wants to attack Christianity, and it wants to attack members of the Jewish faith as well, and even, infidels in their own faith, which we've seen carried out to a great extent as well. President Trump on this issue, how prepared is he, Chris? You can never know what's coming next, but the fear is that something is.
Well, it always could be, but are you scared? I'm not. I certainly take Molly's point that everybody, especially Christians, especially everybody, has to be prepared for the fact that, yeah, there are people in the world that want to do the United States harm and want to harm its citizens. That's a fact of life. That's been a fact of life for quite a while now, and that's something we have learned to live with. But these guys suck. They are terrible. We have destroyed them. The United States Air Force rained hell down on one of the remaining garrisons of ISIS in Syria. We have destroyed these people. We have riven them.
Well, that may be, Chris. I mean, from an institutional perspective, perhaps, but living in New York City, when I go down the West Side Drive and I look over where those 8 tourists from South America were killed, when I go into the subway system, I think about that guy. Yeah, I'm scared. I am scared. And I'm scared in the holidays when I walk up and down this street outside my window right here on 6th Avenue, where there are throngs of tourists, through Rockefeller Center, where the big Christmas tree is, packed people. And all it takes is one little backpack and a guy who's not an idiot who figures out how to blow the thing up. I mean, yes, I'm scared. I think a lot of people are.
When I drive by the Pentagon and when I think about all of the things that could happen when you go around in Washington, D.C. or New York or any of these places, yes, certainly an attack is always possible. But here's why I'm not scared. Because, number one, there's nothing I can do about it if it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's in God's hands, not mine, number one. Number two, we're really good at this. And, yeah, it is anything could always happen. But our record since 2001 of preventing large-scale attacks here in the United States is pretty daggone good.
Large-scale, yes. The Tsarnaev brothers tell a different story, and all of those people who were lost in that, and for every one of those people, Carl, who lost somebody, it only takes one person in your life who's gone to take this really seriously.
Yeah. And look, we have been largely effective since 9/11, but that's because we've adopted as a country a strategy of fighting them over there so we don't have to fight them as much here at home. But we have to be 100% perfect all the time. And as we saw with the recent case here in New York, we're having to deal with remote inspiration. And I think part of these messages are, first of all, to say, hey, we're still around. That was the first one. Right. But the second one was to say, if you're out there and you agree with this, please try and do something during this holiday season.
Good points, all. Thanks, you guys. Great to have you with us today.
You bet.
All right, so a big week in the state of Alabama as it elects a Democrat to serve alongside Republican Senator Richard Shelby. But there's an interesting historical twist, because we always like to put things in big context, and we're going to start doing that on a regular basis here on Friday nights. Republicans may want to stick around to watch this, and Democrats too, for a slice of history with James Rosen to explain. Plus, a father's heartbreak after he loses his son to an overdose. Now this father is tackling the opioid epidemic head on after battling a heroin addiction of his own.
I overdosed on heroin, hit 2 cars, and almost killed 4 people. I'm the guy to get them into treatment.
Role that he believes the government should play, can play, in combating this crisis. When the story continues after this.
My administration is officially declaring the opioid crisis a national public health emergency under federal law.
President Trump making the nation's opioid crisis a top priority for his administration. Last year alone, at least 64,000 Americans died as a result of an overdose. And while the administration and Congress have laid out big goals to stop the epidemic, some are suggesting that they would like to see the wheels turning faster on this in order to save lives. So while we wait for more action from Washington, what can American families do? What can local communities do? My next guest has dedicated his life to that. He knows the dangers of addiction all too well. Tim Ryan got clean and sober behind bars, only to see his son die from a heroin dose months after that. His story was featured in the A&E docuseries Dope Man. Here's a quick clip.
I overdosed on heroin, hit 2 cars, and almost killed 4 people. I'm the guy to get them into treatment. If you want to get better, you're going to end up dead.
You got a gun and I will definitely shoot your up, bro.
She's a heroin addict. All I want is her. You're a relapse king. You make excuses. It's time to man up.
Tim is also advisor to rehab.com. Tim, good to have you here.
Thank you.
Today, powerful message in the documentary. You lost your son and you went through it yourself. What makes a difference between people who can get clean and people who can't?
There's a lot of variables, but the willingness to want to change. A lot of the families are classic enablers. They try to enable their children to get better. You got to take your emotions out of it. You have to let the professionals do what the professionals do and follow the guidance and direction.
So what are the earliest signs? Because, you know, I have a friend who lost his son. I have a friend who lost a nephew. What should we all be looking for at home?
First thing you need to do is get into their technology. That's where the kids are doing everything today. Cell phone monitoring software, computer monitoring software. If there's an issue, drug test them, but have the resources. You know, their hygiene, their friends are changing, money's disappearing, they don't have money, they're sleeping a lot, they have pinned pupils, they're absolutely doing opiates.
What happened with your son?
Unfortunately, Nick followed in my footsteps. I wasn't a father to Nick. I was a friend. I let him smoke weed and drink beer. When I had overdosed and hit these cars and almost killed 4 people and was fighting my case, I was really dope sick one day, and Nick came in and basically gave me 2 bags of heroin. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'm just selling it." And I said, "Nick, you need to shut this down. You know what this drug has done to me." And he looked at me and said, "Well, you're a successful drug addict." So in Nick's delusional mind, because I functioned, I worked, he thought I was successful. Ultimately, 3 months later, we started doing heroin together. I was sentenced to prison. I did 13.5 months. My wife divorced me, lost our house in foreclosure, displaced my wife and 4 kids. When I got out, I set up my foundation. I started working in the treatment space. And on my 21-month sobriety date, my son Nicholas succumbed to an opiate overdose. Worst day of my life. I helped kill my own son, even though he died on my 21-month sobriety date. I have to live with that. But I could take that negative and turn it into a positive, and that's what I'm doing today. I'm sick and tired of burying people.
God bless you. It's an awful scourge. You think the White House is doing everything they can, or what would be your #1 piece of advice for them in the minute we have left?
The president should contact me directly. He needs people like me involved. We need so much more money. We need longer-term treatment. That's why people don't know where to go for a treatment. You know, I work for a treatment center out of Florida, Transformations. I'm an advisor to rehab.com. People can go to this portal and find treatment based on what state they live in, and they're not owned by a treatment center to where it's redirected, but you need to pick up the phone, you need to ask for help, but you need to do your due diligence. The government needs to be allocating so much more funding. We need longer-term treatment, more than 30 days, 90 days, and we need a lot more sober living communities.
That's so key.
Involved.
30 days is not enough.
It's not enough.
90 days
at
is
one
minimum, right? 90 days
and then,
minimum. Everybody needs to get that message,
yes,
because it's great to feel like 30 days worked and everything's over and you're all better now. It doesn't work, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
All right, Tim, good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you very much for sharing your story. We wish you well in your pursuit. Thank you very much. So coming up tonight, I'll look at this week's big political shakeup in deep red Alabama, the state electing a Democrat for the first time since the 1990s, and the last Democrat they elected. Tonight, there is a bombshell new report on the Hill claiming that attorney Lisa Bloom may have tried to set up paydays for women accusing President Trump of sexual misconduct. Bloom, who you probably know well, she is a well-known women's rights lawyer. She allegedly offered to sell victims' stories to TV outlets, and then in the contract, she would work for them for free, but then pocket some of the commission if the TV outlets were willing to pay her client to go on with them. She also reportedly arranged for a donor to pay off one of Trump's accusers' mortgage and tried for another to get a reported $750,000 payout. So just background information you need to know as you look at all these stories, right? So as this week draws to a close, it's time for a new feature on this story. It is called Flashback Friday, and for it, we will look back at one of the week's big events and sort of take a context look at it in the course of history. Today's edition is the Alabama election, and who better to guide us through our flashbacks, because he has them frequently himself, Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen, who joins me now, our resident historian, my friend James. Good evening. So what have you got, James?
Martha, good evening to you. One of the week's biggest political stories, undeniably, was the triumph of Democrat Doug Jones over Republican Roy Moore in that fiercely contested special Senate election in Alabama Tuesday night. Ordinarily, the welter of sexual misconduct allegations confronting Judge Moore would spell certain doom for just about any congressional candidate in any setting. But Alabama is such a staunchly red state that Doug Jones's margin of victory was only about 1.5 percentage points, fewer than 22,000 votes. And many wondered whether a Democrat could win a Senate seat in the Yellowhammer state under any circumstances. As it happens, the last time it happened was a quarter century ago. And even then, there's a catch. In 1992, incumbent Democratic Senator Richard Shelby defeated his largely unknown Republican rival, Richard Sellers, a business consultant from Montgomery, by more than 30 points. Shelby was about as conservative a Democrat as could be. He campaigned in part on his success in keeping Fort McClellan open during a round of base closings, and he was rated as one of the most consistent supporters in the Senate of the incumbent president, Republican George H.W. Bush, who carried Alabama but lost the Oval Office to Democrat Bill Clinton. But within 2 years following the Republican Revolution, Shelby switched parties, and he remains in the Senate today as a Republican, albeit one who said he would support a write-in candidate rather than vote for Roy Moore. By the way, the entire cost of that 1992 Senate race was under $4 million, as contrasted with the Jones-Moore battle, which saw the two sides plus outside groups spend an estimated $25 million. Now, just for good measure, to give you a sense of then and now, the average price of a gallon of gas on Election Day 1992, which was November 3rd, was $1.12. The #1 single on Billboard that week was End of the Road by Boyz II Men. And the top-grossing film at the box office the preceding weekend was Under Siege, starring Steven Seagal. And that last celluloid factoid right there, Martha, should signal to our viewers as we begin this new segment that not every flashback you'll see on Flashback Fridays will create a sense of nostalgia.
I was just going to say, it was a terrible year for movies and music. But there was one movie that is interesting to note, especially in the context of your political flashback here. Take a look at this little clip from 1992.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
That's what President Trump was
Yes.
doing back in 1992. He was giving Macaulay Culkin directions at the Plaza, James.
Well, and being the leader of the free world, one senses he could probably still give Macaulay Culkin some directions.
No, that's for sure. Where were you in 1992, by the way, my friend?
You really know how to hurt a man, Martha. I was in New York City, and I had just published my first article anywhere, which was in National Review, and I had just started my work on a book about Watergate, which only took me another 16 years to finish and publish.
It. It's a good book. It was worth it. I was falling in love with my husband in 1992.
That's so sweet.
In New York City. Yes, I was.
Did you guys go see Under
even
Siege together?
Terrible music. No, actually. We went to see The Godfather 3, though.
Wow.
Which wasn't
all right.
nearly as good as 1 and 2, as you well know.
Agreed.
James, thank you. That was fun. We'll see you soon for another round of Flashback Friday. Have a good weekend. Thanks, James.
You too.
So there is a battle underway this weekend. Football.
The news coverage every morning on Fox News Channel.
So this weekend's must-see NFL matchup is Tom Brady versus Ben Roethlisberger. They have a storied rivalry. If you're a football fan, you know that. The Pats go into it off a stinger of a loss in Miami on Monday night. Followers of Brady on Instagram got a peek into how he gets back into the game with a bit of poetry. The man who never had to toil to gain and farm his patch of soil, who never had to win his share of sun and sky and light and air, never became a manly man, but lived and died as he began. Moving, right? That is how the GOAT gets back in the game. We will see if it works. Have a great weekend, everybody. You know where I'll be on Sunday afternoon. Tucker Carlson coming up next. Have a good night, everybody.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Ersatz women's rights lawyer Lisa Bloom has finally been exposed for who she really is. Bloom has built a career posturing as a champion of the oppressed, but the only person who seems to be winning in that equation is Lisa Bloom. Last summer, for example, she represented Kathy Griffin following Griffin's Trump beheading stunt, only to have Griffin turn around and denounce her, Bloom, for excessive fees and, quote, fame whoring. This fall, the great feminist warrior fought to protect, of all people, Harvey Weinstein. Actress Rose McGowan says that Bloom offered her a 7-figure payday if she agreed to call Weinstein a changed man, which she did not agree to. Now, The Hill newspaper has a new report alleging that Lisa Bloom solicited funds to pay off women who would then accuse the president of sexual assault. Trace Gallagher has the full story on that. He joins us tonight. Trace?
Hi, Tucker. Lisa Bloom says reports that women were paid to come forward with accusations of sexual misconduct by President Trump are nothing more than right-wing efforts to discredit victims. And yet, Bloom, the daughter of famed attorney Gloria Allred, fully acknowledges that she tried to get tabloid media outlets and pro-Hillary Clinton political action committees to pay these women. The Hill, which broke the story, says Bloom arranged for a donor to pay off one of the accuser's mortgage and tried to score a six-figure payout for another. One of the women who was offered $750,000 declined to come forward. Lisa Bloom says the money, of which she takes 1/3, is meant to keep her clients safe and in some cases to help them relocate. Of Lisa Bloom's 4 clients, 2 of them decided to come forward and 2 did not, including one who decided to tell her story to The Hill after learning that Bloom was representing the alleged serial sexual harasser Harvey Weinstein. Bloom and Weinstein's relationship ended when rape allegations went public. The women who did not come forward say she supported Trump in 2016 and does not resent him because he stopped his advances toward her when she asked him to. Lisa Bloom says the women who did come forward are telling the truth, and the story by The Hill is trying to undermine them now that they are gaining momentum. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thank you. Emily Capano is a legal analyst and former federal attorney, and she joins us tonight. So, Emily, at this point, we know that Lisa Bloom, who for years has posed as a champion of women, particularly of victims of sexual assault, took money to flack, in essentially, for Harvey Weinstein, discredit his victims. TMZ reports she recorded one of them in an effort to discredit her. And now we learned that she's profiting from the sexual harassment claims of this next set of women. Why is she still able to do this? How does she get a pass to continue this pretty lucrative career she has, flacking for people like this?
Exactly. What I find so disturbing here, there's an element of hypocrisy fatigue here, frankly. And what is so disappointing about this in particular is that this is an attorney who's purporting to be a champion of these women's rights and values. And attorneys, especially in this realm, are supposed to be advocates. And that's more than just showing up in court. So the fact that she is subjecting these women to another round of abuse and trauma and shaming is incredibly disappointing here. And, it's not illegal for PACs to pay for true stories and to dig up dirt. We've seen it in the past with David Brock and Larry Flint. But again, the fact that it's coming from an attorney is incredibly disappointing. And it takes a lot more in the state of California for an attorney to be admonished or disbarred. Honestly, we're not going to see that for this. But it's just a subsequent betrayal. And again, it's another unraveling and revealing of someone who's a hypocrite.
Why wouldn't the bar take action? I mean, here you have a person who was caught lying, for one. At one point, she said this of Harvey Weinstein: "I was never aware there were allegations of sexual assault." Well, of course she was. And she briefed the board of the Weinstein companies on this. I mean, her job was to protect Harvey Weinstein against these allegations. That's not enough to get a censure from the bar in California?
There's a pretty strict code of conduct in the state of California, but in terms of actual admonishment, she can be recommended for a review. But in past cases, it's just taken more for someone to be disbarred or admonished. And all of us find her behavior reprehensible and, for me, embarrassing as a California state attorney. But again, it just takes a lot more here. And that is what's so disappointing, is I think these gray areas where there's dishonesty, but what was the exact relationship and nature of her signing on the dotted line with these clients, and how, in essence, does this break a specific rule that the California State Bar or the ABA has passed? Unfortunately, it's gray. And so at this point, the illumination hopefully will decrease her client list, and that may be enough to at least, render her that she won't do this behavior in the future.
Well, you'd think she would at least be publicly discredited. It does strike me as a non-attorney as unethical that she was trying to set up media appearances for people making claims of sexual assault or harassment, and then was apparently, by her own admission, trying to take 1/3 of the fees. Is it normal to do this on commission, as she seems to be doing?
Right. You know, I personally have not seen that in the past. And she was clear and upfront with saying, well, we take a third. But what I found disturbing is the fact that her justification of such was the insurance fees and the electrical bills of her law firm. It really had a minimal correlation with her representing those women on air. And frankly, as you know, media appearances are often not rewarded because the whole point is there are ethical considerations, right, to support the veracity. You don't want to cross that line or present an appearance of impropriety. So here, it's almost like she was running a racket, but because she was blatant, I don't see her being disbarred or being formally admonished. It's just simply disappointing and reprehensible. And as you said, hopefully now this revelation and illuminating it will make others refuse to work with her in the future.
Yeah, if you're paying the victims of Harvey Weinstein to lie and to vouch for his good character, don't call yourself a feminist. That would be my rule. Emily, thank you. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Joe DeGenova was a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and he joins us tonight. Joe, I have to just ask you very quickly before we get to the Russia investigation a question about Lisa Bloom. What does it take for a lawyer to be censured by the bar or to be disbarred? If you have multiple examples of lying and unethical behavior, that's not enough?
It's not usually in most bars. Big bars like California and New York tend to protect their lawyers, and their ethical systems tend to slap people on the wrist. My guess would be she would not get any type of ethical restrictions imposed on her as a result of this. I can tell you this, when we do a pro bono case at our firm, we don't take a cut of anything. We represent people for free. We even incur the cost. So whatever she said was pro bono, that's nonsense. I think that misrepresentation to the public is absolutely disgusting, but it's consistent with her behavior.
Yeah, it's free, except I take a third.
Yeah.
There's talk about doublespeak. So to this investigation, you obviously have conducted investigations. When you did you ever stack them with prosecutors who were personally hostile to the person being investigated?
No, and let me just say this right now, Tucker. What you have now unfolding inside the FBI and the Department of Justice under Obama is a brazen plot to do two things: to exonerate Hillary Clinton because of an animus toward Donald Trump, and then if she lost, to frame the incoming president for either a criminal act or impeachment. This is one of the most disgusting performances by the senior officials at the FBI and the Department of Justice, and it demands that every one of these agents involved be fired, and that the people who are still in the Justice Department be fired, including Mr. Orr, and that they impanel a federal grand jury to investigate the conduct of McCabe and Strzok and Page and Comey and Orr and everybody in the Obama Justice Department who even touched this, because it's very clear that they conspired to frame the incoming president of the United States. And it's a frightening and disgusting prospect that FBI officials, senior FBI officials, would do this. And those text messages are frightening. They're just frightening.
The Trump administration oversees the Department of Justice now. What would it take to call some of these people to account for their behavior, at least to get to the bottom of it? Mr. Orr, for example, who met with people from Fusion GPS and didn't tell his superiors about it. His wife worked there. He didn't tell them about that either. Why is he still there?
Well, that's a good question. He's been demoted. He lost his Associate Deputy Attorney General slot 4 doors down from Mr. Rosenstein. He's now back in his old job as the head of an organized crime drug task force. I do not understand how he can continue to stay in the department. In all likelihood, he's being investigated by the Inspector General as part of that larger investigation into what the Justice Department did with Comey and others to basically throw the case against Clinton. A bunch of dirty cops got together and decided to throw a case against the Democratic presidential nominee. I don't think Mr. Orr is going to be around the department very long because he can't function ethically in those constraints.
So just finally, just some perspective for those of us who haven't conducted these investigations. We know that Director Comey had written the speech he subsequently gave in July of 2016, 2 months before, in which he exonerated Hillary Clinton, before which he'd even interviewed her or a dozen of her top aides. Is that unusual to come to a conclusion like that, she's innocent, before even interviewing her. That seems odd.
It is not only extremely unusual, it's never happened before. James Comey threw the case against Hillary Clinton in conjunction with senior FBI officials and Justice Department officials in the Obama administration at the time. It's never done. Comey sold his soul to the devil. Believe me, you cannot believe the telephone calls we're getting from current FBI people about how they cannot abide by what's going on. And one thing they can't understand is, why is Andrew McCabe still at Christopher Wray's right hand inside the senior offices of the FBI? I mean, McCabe and Strzok and Page are all out of the same cloth. They conspired to exonerate improperly and politically Hillary Clinton, and also, if she lost, to frame the incoming president of the United States with a
At least election is a Democratic redistabler and says for her virtue DOJ official wife worked for Orm's with Fusion. Yes, not tell. It is rational to suspect the investigation. I comprehensive view public. That's not thing. Not Philippe Reines was in the Hillary State Department during 16 campaign and at joins us. So Philippe, I'm not here, not in the Supreme Court, but it's have to be the have to be simple question is this: if you're investigating somebody, shouldn't you at least interviews of years and or you died 2 months before and decided that she's innocent of charge?
Well, I sit here Comey because I'm here and it's hard to say with people who think that or any crazy Clinton or had a much being president not been so I don't think it's that
you he by his statements. I said even elect on the left not out Hillary Clinton the okay reach a conclusion before interviewing him.
I know that he did inappropriate for him even considering a public statement. He found there to proceed on, and he statements has been and he went on July 5th. So I agree with you. He did not appropriately, and I think he ended up for that because of someone having drafted a pretty thorough and they went with it.
So if you was your I'm sure
I think he
okay. A second. Well, Comey's the one who's Russian, then seems lost in the recently. This Russian interference in the 2016 between the government. None surface to this that there's general between those parties. Are you?
Well, no, it's we know that 4 pled guilty for way or not in regards to him.
That's not true. He actually pled lying. About no, but I do know that the most intensive in my lifetime by the of a public official has leaked. Like I mean, Strzok message here. There's no evidence that there was actual collusion. In fact, that's I believe there and was Trump. I mean, it's like bothered.
If the people we just trying to remind he's soon enough. Next week, next 6. We should.
I'm not calling his
the text you have. You should.
Okay.
People under my process.
You know who's Congress? The oversight.
Fine.
And that's okay. But end of a bunch of people charged for obstruction, but the charge and not evidence. Correlation of between campaign. Agree. This is total. And to this.
Absolutely, I agree to that. Because where there is as much smoke, there's more. There is flame or fires. These people are going. And if this all
someone guilty.
No,
standing. Let's just
and guilty. They are guilty.
Look guilty, and we you for unrelated crime. Guilty of the crime.
For me, it's Lynn's. I am. We else
jumps in face, and we're going to send you. I get. He lied. Not just Flynn. The point is, to certain evidence of Trump. The point. Administration do that at university.
I don't believe that's parts of the refuse to accept Carlson's community assessment at the under.
Where's a single of evidence of that?
The intelligence parts of people have presented.
The call the collapse and the people consist.
You forgot.
No,
you forgot.
That's the first. I agree with that. Single is public. We're all supposed to be in both. It must because superior.
That's public.
I'm not.
No, but you have Republicans and.
Yeah, I agree with all the ones reflect the unnamed
tellers. You've seen what you and I.
Is there stop?
We're a secret nation.
We for this. We have to know this.
We have to know what happened. Like that process is do, and then Mueller left alone.
Oh, we're
clearly,
but it
clearly he hit a. And that nerve is.
All right. Thank you. No. Rahm Emanuel's regime in Chicago has a new plan for so-called undocumented immigrants. Give them documents, just like everybody else. For more, we're joined by Fox National correspondent Matt Finn, who's in Chicago for us tonight. Hey, Matt.
Tucker, Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel has unveiled his new city ID program. The individual IDs will be called City Keys. The program will give a government ID to anyone living in the city, regardless of their U.S. immigration status. The mayor of Chicago says the IDs are meant to welcome the undocumented community into the city.
If you want somebody who's undocumented to feel comfortable to be able to drive their child to school and all the benefits, they have to be part of the city. This municipal ID, the City Key, will bring all those different communities and more that are on the periphery, on the sideline, into our city. And when we say welcome, we mean welcome.
The city of Chicago says the IDs are meant to be an all-in-one resource for Chicagoans who can link their library and public transit accounts to the card, and there will be discounts at cultural centers and for our veterans and senior citizens. However, critics, including Chicago aldermen, worry Emanuel's program will give IDs to people here illegally, especially since the city of Chicago will not be asking applicants about their U.S. immigration status. Applicants only have to prove they live in Chicago and must pass a 4-point ID system, and applicants are able to pick their gender on the IDs. The first 100,000 IDs will be free, and the city of Chicago insists the program will be secure enough to weed out fraudulent applicants. Tucker.